All right, everybody, welcome to this episode of the Card Brokers podcast. Today we have on Ivan, aka Watch the Breaks on Twitter. So he's one of the biggest Twitter personalities out there. I guess that's what you classify yourself as, not an influencer, personality.
Uh, I'm a collector.
There you go.
That's that's all. The only thing is because there is a name, like I just changed my name in the display. I don't know if this records it, but like people know me as Watch the Breaks just because of how the last decade has panned out. So yeah, personality. I'm definitely a personality. I'm definitely a person.
That's true. I met Ivan for the first time in Dallas, and it was an interesting thing because I was like, it was when F1 really wasn't taking off yet, but I'd started buying some, and this guy was talking about F1 like at a table, and I was like just casually talking to him, and I was like, wait a second. I asked him what his name was, and he was like Ivan. I don't know if you remember this, Ivan.
Yeah, I do.
And I was like, oh, I talk to you all the time, so it was just a funny way of meeting you when we tweeted each other all the time. So
Yeah, and no offense, TJ, but everybody at the card show looks like you. So
not as good looking, but I'll give it to him.
yeah.
So
Yeah. No, it was a lot of fun. But you also, one thing you don't get from Twitter is people's heights. It's
mhm.
really hard. And so then you meet them in person and then it all like recontextualizes in your brain. But like I mean, those back pages, if you know him, Eric, he's been a longtime collector, longtime friend. Some of my favorite cards that I keep on my desk always are from him. Like he's easily the most recognizable person in the hobby if you've seen him on Twitter at all. But I had no idea. He's tall. He's
Mhm.
tall. So my first national, 8 years ago now, maybe 7 years ago. I think it was in Cleveland. Was that 2015 or 2014? Anyways, like it's just super fun seeing somebody that you know from online in person and being like, hey, you're so and so. But I'd say there is about half the time where you find out after the fact. In fact, actually, another funny story about that. Since we're just talking about community, if you know Muffin Cards,
Yes, I do.
so we've been friends on Twitter for a while. A great guy, funny personality. He can roast me like none other, and it's hilarious, and I'm here for it. He posted, I think it was the first time I'd ever actually seen him do a personal pick, like the day before the Mint Collective, or he was
Mhm.
in town a day early for the Mint Collective, which just happened recently in Las Vegas at the end of March. And so he actually posted a pic and I saw his face. But honestly, it's not like I sat there and stared at it,
Right.
it didn't glow over it or anything like that. But he was walking in Las Vegas and posted a picture. Late the next evening, I'm at the DCI booth, Dallas DCI grading booth, and Jason, who is their COO, who's a friend of mine, said like, "Hey, take a picture of us," and handed his phone to somebody. And I'm looking at the phone, the camera, and I'm like, I probably have this super confused look on my face in it because I'm realizing as the person's taking the picture that it's Muffin Cards. I'm like, wait, you're Muffin.
Yeah.
And so yeah, just
It's funny when like you mentioned the height thing. So my biggest shock was like meeting Larry Legend. I don't know if you know.
oh,
Oh my goodness. Like, and he lives like a half mile from me right now.
oh,
He
that's
came to
awesome.
FSU. But so when I first started posting like pictures of myself, I posted with like Ryan, and him and Ryan was a little taller than me at the time, not anymore. I'm taller than him now. Just putting
Wait,
that.
what?
I
How does
grew.
that happen?
I'm only 21. So
Yeah, but you're still growing. I think I hit peak height at like 16.
my feet are growing. I'm having to like sell all my shoes. Whole other story. But my first my first pictures on Twitter was with Larry Legend, like, and everybody was like, wait a second. I mean, you just look at the picture. I'm like way down here. And
Yeah,
what is he, 6'8" or 6'9"? It's crazy. And then
yeah,
I had one with like Old Dirty Mooch, who is also ginormous.
yeah.
And then I had one with Blake from Deep Fried Breaks, who is also ginormous.
Mhm.
And I'm like, so people thought I was small at the national. I don't know. It just got to be a big joke, but
Yeah, that was my other reason I didn't recognize you. I thought you were like 5'0". I thought you were shorter than my
did you
wife. And
really?
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh,
But it is funny. Shane Salmonson, who actually does a weekly column for Beckett too, but is a great baseball card collector to follow. He posted a picture with Tim Wakefield just this past week, and I was laughing at it because I'm like, people that don't know Shane probably are like, because they're like the same height, and it's like, no, that's how tall, like Tim Wakefield, professional baseball pitcher, like he's got height, and that's how tall Shane is like they look like they're the same height. But
well,
so
let's talk about. I'm gonna shift gears on you. I know
yeah,
you.
that's the most important thing is heights in the hobby.
We could go on for days.
We're measuring here. That's all we do is measure.
Or
I'm
wait,
taller than you.
that's funny. But when so you live in Hollywood, I think that's pretty well known. You post pictures of it and everything. So can you talk about how you got to Hollywood and your old show? I'm not sure everybody's aware that you had a show at one time.
Yeah, so that's actually where my whole name comes from. I don't do breaks yet. I say after 10 years of tweeting, um, I don't do breaks. I moved to Los Angeles. I got a degree in theater from the University of Nebraska, and I moved to LA in 2007 to pursue a career in the arts, acting, making television, movies, commercials. Um, Now it's not that easy. You don't just show up and they start putting you in things. You got to work. So I got a job as an assistant to a producer who's relatively well known, and ended up working there for 3.5 years. And then when I left that to really focus in on acting, and waiting tables in the meantime, I had done a couple of different web series things that I produced on my own because I found that I had the skill set to organize. A producer is basically just an event manager, an event organizer. It's like, can you get everybody and can you get them all in the budget? Well, we'll talk about that second part later. But so I was doing like creating my own content as well. And you do like these web series and you get 200 or 300 views, and, like your mom would watch it and the editor's mom would watch it. And you're like, how do I get more people to actually watch it? And I had just gotten back into card collecting too, like end of 2011. And so I prospected football pretty hard in 2012. And then I started getting into baseball with the Cubs drafting Chris Bryant in 2013. And he's still my guy, 100%. Prefer him in a Cubs uniform, but favorite baseball player of all time and always will be, barring any celebrity circumstances, I guess. And, but here's the thing, I make every single mistake once.
Good
In fact,
advice.
it was kind of funny. The producer that I worked for, he had a pretty strict standard, obviously, to work for a producer at that level. It was never make the same mistake twice. I never made the same mistake twice, but man, I learned I learned a lot through mistakes. Carried the same thing through to my card collecting. And so I was thinking, like, oh, you know what if I made a web series about my failings as a card collector, like all of the mistakes that I made? So we did a little web series called The Breaks, because it's a pun on box breaks and getting the breaks in life, like catching a break, that sort of thing. So we did that. The first episode we put on YouTube, got written up in Beckett. Actually, Suze was working for Beckett at the time and did a write-up on that, which just was incredible. And then we were able to film an episode at the National in Cleveland that year, and on and on. So my dad joke personality was immortalized in that web series, which you can still watch on YouTube, The Breaks. But that's where my name comes from too. So
I love it. I
10,
love it.
10 years later.
I love my dad jokes too, so maybe I can live up to that. But I love it. So kind of go off of that. You said you make the same mistake, or you don't make the same mistake twice, and that's probably the biggest thing. Because when I got into cards, it's easy to do that. You look at how many people bought base cards back then, and not many people are buying base now when you're looking to make money with it. So what were some of the biggest? I know you said you were a 2012 football prospector. So did you lose money on Andrew Luck? Was that one of those?
Oh, of course, I lost money on Andrew Luck. Yeah,
Okay.
I was heavy on him. My very first giveaway, because I do a lot of giveaways on
Mm-hmm.
Twitter. My very first giveaway was I had ripped some Inception boxes, and I pulled a Russell Wilson autograph, a blue autograph. And your eyes got real big there, TJ. But But remember, back then it was Andrew Luck, RG3, Russell Wilson,
Right.
in that order. So it wasn't as huge of a card then as it is now. So my very first giveaway was a Russell Wilson Inception autograph. It's actually I did it from my personal account at the time. It was before I'd even started the breaks account. So yeah, I mean, I've lost money. We've all lost money. I've sold too soon. I've bought too late. I've bought hype. I've, held guys, Blake Bortles, like his
Oh,
career never went anywhere. But that's why, and you and I were even talking about it beforehand. I love what you're telling me about where you're at as a collector right now. That's why it's a hobby. That's why it's about collecting. Card Brokers is going to pull the plug on this episode in about 30 more seconds. They're like, shut up. No, but that's the thing. And this is one of the reasons I didn't hate Card Brokers when they came up, is because the reason the hobby is popular for speculating is because it's fun.
exactly.
Right? You can make money flipping sneakers, but there's very little emotional attachment, or your feet grow new sizes, like you've got, and like, but at the end of the day, I know very few people, and ironically, I'm going to get fired from something else here. More of them that I know are LCS owners than Card Brokers members, who only care about money and don't have any emotional connection to the cards.
I agree.
Or people get into it because they see the money, but then they get the emotional connection. So like, what were you telling me that you're buying now?
I'm buying Alabama cards, so that's my biggest PC. I got the one of one Devontae Smith flawless RPA, and then I got
Wow.
the one Tua. So I finally found that. It came up. I got a lot. It was in LA actually, and Abe. I don't know if you know him. Abe's Cards. He like sent me a picture of it. And I've been negotiating with this guy for 3 weeks. The seller ended up getting that, but I'm on a tangent. But back to that, yeah, it started out as a hobby for me as a kid, and then the pandemic hit, and I always had a business mindset, and I'm an accounting major, so once you know numbers, you kind of know half of the negotiation, and then it's just gaining information, which I'm obsessive about. If I get into something, I want to know everything about it. So that's what I did, and it turned into a money thing. Well, when it got away from being a hobby and into the money thing, it's easy to burn out. I think it's what you were saying too. It's just there's no emotional connection. Like I would buy cards and I'd be like, oh, I love Zion because I'm a Pelicans fan. I was a genuine Pelicans fan. I love Zion, but I have no connection to it because I broke that connection by selling and selling and selling and selling. So once you kind of neutralize yourself from that, you're making money, but you can just fizzle out. Like I was making a great living. I'm not gonna tell the IRS that, but I was making a great living.
You just did.
That was a joke.
editor.
But I was making a great living, but I just wasn't enjoying it. And it got to be where it was so stressful because it was all about money. So if a player tweaked his ankle or something, like when Zion kept getting injured and I've got $6,000 in Zion, I'm sitting there just stressing and stressing and stressing, waiting on a medical report. That's not fun. So if you can balance that, like you're saying, and I think like you've done too, and I think you got something going. But can you talk about that a little bit? What are your favorite things to collect? I know you're a big F1 guy. Is that something that you came into on the hype, or you have watched
So
it?
F1 is a funny story for me. But first off, let me just set the record straight. Cubs. I love the Cubs. I will always love the Cubs. If I look off the camera, it's because I have my favorite Chris Bryant card right here next to me at my desk at all times. BGS 9.5 2014 Bowman Chrome Prospect Auto. It was a gift from a friend of mine, Mike in Vegas. Gifted it to me raw, and I graded it with Beckett. Because guess what? Here's news that nobody here knows, because y'all are kids and only been collecting for 6 months. In the 2010s, in that decade, if you got a modern card and wanted it graded, especially a chrome or a prism, you went to Beckett.
Yep.
Mind blowing, huh?
I know, it's correct. When I buy PC cards from back then, they're all in Beckett slab.
Don't even get me started on I'm not mad at PSA. PSA has done a really good job, and I like a lot of the technological advancements they've made in the last year. But just a little history, like BGS 9.5 was a PSA 10. for the longest time, comps wise, if you were buying those. Maybe the slightest bit of variance, but to where the BGS 10 just blew it out of the water and the black label was unreal. So that's my favorite card. F1, I've got a buddy in Hollywood, as you say. Technically, we're in Beverly Hills. I don't know if that's better or worse or makes the story better. On the border of West Hollywood. Beverly Hills, we really stumbled into that. My wife works 6 blocks from where we live, and someone else that worked at her work owned the building we moved into 10 years ago. So we got a good deal. So it was like, people would always say, even back then, they'd be like, how can you afford to live in Beverly Hills? And we're like, well, she gets to walk to work, so she doesn't have to drive and pay parking, because you have to pay parking where you work in LA. Sorry, this is the accounting finance guys geeking out. It has nothing to do with cards. And my office could always be wherever I wanted. So it's like, without having to drive before COVID, like we saved enough money. And then there's rent control in Beverly Hills. Now we can never afford to leave, because people are like, how are you only paying that?
That's interesting.
Anyways, so yeah. So a friend of mine, the cool thing about Hollywood, I will say, is that you end up having friends who have friends that know stuff or are powerful or do things, and you just meet cool people if you care about those things. I don't even know, after 15 years, I don't know if that's important or not. It can be fun though. So my buddy knows that I collected cards, and in the summer of 2020, he said to me, hey, do you follow F1 at all? And I'm like, no, I don't follow any racing. I literally did not know the difference between Indy, F1, and I knew that NASCAR was a little different, but I didn't know what was different. And he said, what's really interesting is, I guess the one family controlled the media rights for forever. And something that I've learned in business, because I now do finance, actually, I don't even do acting anymore. I've been in finance for almost 7 years now, is a lot of the things that listeners may say, or people may say in Facebook groups, when they see a business mess up, they say, well, how did they do that? Guys, businesses are not smart. Businesses don't care a lot of times. They're not smart. They don't have all the oversight. They don't have all the levels that you think of. People show up and do a job. They're not thinking about everything that could go wrong. And sometimes they just don't care. I worked for a family-owned restaurant chain that literally shut down their 4th most profitable restaurant because they didn't like being forced into a negotiation with the landlord the way that they were. It was more important to them. You or I would say, well, detach yourself from that and keep the profitable restaurant. But it's people. Yeah. So a similar thing, is my understanding, was what it was with F1. The media rights were controlled by a family who was happy, didn't need more, didn't want to sell out, whatever you call it. Well, they finally sold a few years back. And that's what led to then, these media conglomerates take over, and they're like, okay, how do we actually grow this? How do we drip everything out of it? How do we squeeze every juice out of the orange? And that's how Netflix got the access they did. And so he was like, you should really pay attention to it, because there's changes coming up, and they're going to market it, and they're doing all that. And so I started, and then the second that Topps Now put out cards, I knew that Lewis Hamilton was the GOAT. I knew he was the greatest. And so I bought up a ton of those Topps Now Lewis Hamiltons, and there was only 1,912 sold. So I guess it wasn't that huge. And then I bought up a few of the other drivers throughout that first release. And then I went crazy and pre-ordered 2 cases of Chrome, which I've never done, never gone that heavy on something. And then turns out my friend was right. Netflix was right. Topps was right. F1 is awesome as a sport. And not only is it awesome, but they're marketing it now. And what I've found since, what I love about it, that I feel like gets lost sometimes on, I'm going to say Americans, because generally it's us, that say it. It's like, well, pump and dump and this and that. And it's like, no, it is a great fan sport. Not just because it's a great fan sport. Hockey's a great fan sport. Why isn't hockey blown up incredibly? 70 games, 80 games, lots to follow, 4 different lines in hockey, right? Who's your favorite hockey team, TJ?
I'm gonna go with the Lightning. I've
You're
never watched hockey.
you're guessing the Lightning.
Well, here's a story. So we're gonna go off on a small tangent, come right back. So I went down. I work for Deloitte. Everybody, that's an accounting firm for whoever doesn't know. And I was interning there, and we went out for a few, refreshments after work. And the Lightning happened to be playing in a
Like that it's a
game.
PG-13 show.
Oh yeah, no,
The
no, not usually, but
refreshments.
so yeah, we went out.
I really am the hobby dad, huh? You're like, you have to be on your best behavior around
I think
me.
so. I think that's what I'm losing.
We're literally recording this on 420 and you're using the word
Oh
refreshments
yeah, it's gonna be
to
a great.
describe going to a bar.
So yeah, we got drunk and they were
There
like,
we go.
"Hey, do you want to go to a hockey game?" I was like, "Sure." So we go to the hockey game. Turned out it was a Stanley Cup, which is their championship. I had no idea. And so I'm find myself in a Stanley Cup game, but I bought like a ticket way up in the arena, and my buddy had gotten one that was like way close. So we just bounced around drunk the entire time, going from seat to seat of people who were getting like, going to use the bathroom or getting
Yeah.
food. And so we were just sitting in like $4,000 seats here and $4,000 seats there. It was great. So yeah, definitely Lightning.
I love it. So that said, hockey is a pretty complex sport to follow because if you've ever played, when you're going full speed, like the best players are on the ice for 4 minutes before shifting out.
Mhm.
There's 4 lines that they employ. That's deep. And the fourth line matters as much as the first line in the sense because the scoring is so tough, right? If your fourth line is miles ahead of the other team's fourth line, that's going to be a huge advantage. Great sport. Really hard for the casual person who works let's call it a 9 to 7, right? In 2022, has kids. Like, I don't have time to get invested in hockey.
Mhm.
F1 has what football had that made it the best fantasy sport, which is football is every Sunday. Yeah, they've started messing with that. And it's honestly, I feel like been to the detriment of popularity a little bit. Viewership would say different, I'm sure. But still, it's set your lineup once, deal with it for the week. F1, same thing. 20 drivers. We may see 2 or 3 change during a season. That's it.
Mhm.
10 teams. Every Sunday, really every other Sunday, 2 Sundays in a row and then a break and then Sunday. Like, it's an easy sport for the casual to follow. Jump in and in 10 minutes of commentator time, catch up on what the drama is.
And I agree because like then you get the Netflix show added to it, like you talked about marketing and
Mm-hmm.
you kind of get that basketball aspect too. You don't get this much in football sometimes, but in basketball, you can see a player like Trey Young, who's just can be an asshole, complete asshole, like he was like a season ago, and have like the best season he's had in his career. But his card prices go down because of personality. Same thing with F1. When you watch the Netflix series, you'll have guys that may not have the results, may not have the wins. Like Gasly comes to mind, or I don't know how to say his name. Hope it's Gasly.
Mm-hmm.
But I know he's like a fan favorite on the show, so his prices have started to reflect as such. More so, I know they're not in line with Verstappen or stuff like that. But then you have some of the winners like Botas, who doesn't have the personality that I know of as a casual. That's why his stuff isn't up there where others are. So correct me if I'm wrong and kind of go on that.
Well, you are a little bit on that if we're giving specific intrinsic things. Like, I know of a few bodice collectors, and I could be mispronouncing it. Don't judge them. Who love him, and he actually has one of I think, the funniest personalities on the grid. He just was overshadowed for forever at Mercedes, and basically people knew his job was to support Lewis. He had a ton of wins. He's got a ton of Grand Prix cards in 2020
Yeah.
Chrome. Like, he was winning because he was in such a great car. But again, that's the beauty of it is if you can rip a blaster at 2x the cost, because that's the reality of things right now, and still enjoy it, even if you don't make money, that's a sticky sport.
Gotcha.
And so there can be guys that are ripping it for Lewis, ripping it for Verstappen, ripping it for Leclerc now. and instead they hit a numbered Gasly or a numbered Bottas, but he's the driver they actually like
There you go.
great. That's the balance that the hobby needs in order to be a hobby, in order to thrive and succeed too. So but I also like it because there is my other big thing has always been growing the hobby. So
Hmm.
I've always been focused on growing the hobby. I love what Fanatics is preaching right now about how big the hobby could be, because I've always felt that way. And I've always wondered why the hobby markets to the hobby instead of markets to the sports fan.
Yeah.
I've been wondering this for a decade. Like, why are we not out at stadiums talking about the hobby? Why are we talking about the hobby here? And so I think that F1 with Drive to Survive also creates a great opportunity if we can. It's that balance of how much product do you want out there. Too much product being out there brings prices down, but at the same time, more product being out there means more fans of F1, more fans of Drive to Survive can pick up product and be brought back to cards.
Yeah, I like what you're saying too, and I think that's a big point of contention. Like you hit a couple of things there that were in like Instagram hot topics for a minute, which and Twitter as well, where it's like, okay, F1 is just all hype, and it's like, well, they're like you explained. I had no idea, so I appreciate that about the media group that sold and
Mm-hmm.
started advertising it differently to make money and to get exposure. So that answers a lot of the questions there. And then you hit on the exposure because when Ken Golden has Drake on, and then people are like, why do we need Drake? And it's like, why are you secluding an entire market to yourself when at the same time you're whining that your prices are or that your values are going down
Yeah.
in your cards?
And I
It
will
makes me
clarify if any of my good friends that hate card brokers are listening. Um, TJ, you said it right. And complaining my cards are going down.
yeah.
That's what you can't have both ways. I do know, and I really respect, I don't feel the same, but I really respect a few absolute collecting purists who think it's bad for the hobby because the prices go up, who think it's bad for the hobby because they still feel like the people are more in it for the money than for the actual love. And they think that it attracts an additional element that is sleazy and dirty and takes more advantage of than already has been over the decades. So
Right.
that I can totally understand. I'm a I'm a super community outgoing person. I love more people. I love knowing more people. So for me, this version of the hobby is what I like. But I do just want to clarify, like, really point out one, you said it right with you can't complain about growth and complain about prices going down when they do. It's got to be one or the other there. There are some people that are only one or the other of that side.
Right. So I mean, it goes back to that point. Like you want to see that growth, whether it be as a collector or a buyer, but you can't mix the two. So it's if you don't want growth, you want it to be a collecting thing, then you're fine with prices staying down. You don't want to see that growth. But if you're sitting there like a lot of people are, where especially on Instagram, it's like, why do we need this? Why do we need this? Why do we need this? But I'm also having a sale. Why is nothing selling on Twitter? Well, it's you if you don't have exposure and you're recycling, but I think we're getting down to the point where people that were in it for the money are kind of fizzling out, or you're seeing them buying other stuff. Like I did it I got me through college, but at the same time, now I'm buying just a massive amount of personal collection stuff now that I'm getting into a full-time job and I can support that.
Yeah.
So I think
Well,
it's
so there's something, since we've got such a huge audience on this show, I want to use this platform to say what you can do if you feel like things are fizzling in any genre or area. Um, First, it's keep context. So you may recall last May was when there was absolute doomsdayers out talking about the hobby based on basketball,
mm-hmm.
based on basketball prices. Basketball prices had dropped and people were just saying, oh, it's done. And that was when I specifically went on TerraPeak and I Googled in that month, might have been 6 weeks,
I remember this tweet.
$5 million had been spent on eBay on Topps F1 cards.
Yep.
So it wasn't necessarily that the hobby was dying. It's that there is only a finite amount of money that can be spent. People's budgets are only so big, and new things come out and people want to buy that, and they move to that. So one, always keep the broader perspective of like, know what you're looking at. Oh man, Josh Allen's market is down. Actually, that's the reverse, right? It's like, man, Patrick Mahomes is down. Yeah, and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow are up, right?
People were basing it on, you're exactly right there, because it's like Mahomes loses a Super Bowl doesn't bring down the card market, because for every $1,000 that isn't spent on Mahomes card, another 2,000 is spent on a Burrow card. So people,
Exactly.
it's so narrowed in. Like, if
Consumer spending habits don't change that drastically. Now they do change when people start to get burnt out and fizzled out. This is why the second piece of that is, once we have that knowledge on the cycle of one, money movement between different verticals, and then two, the consumer behavior, the thing to remember is when we get in, we get really excited. We buy a bunch of stuff, that can be 2 months to 10 months to 2 years, maybe even, that we're still in that phase. Then it's like, oh wait, I got to get rid of some of this. Then we start selling. Then we get to a point where it's like stuff isn't selling anymore. And it's like, what's going on? And I'm frustrated and I'm buying, but the stuff isn't as exciting that I'm buying anymore. And we forget, once we find a really good community, we forget how we got into it.
Right.
Who introduced it to us, who reminded us of it, who brought us back to it. And that's what, again, Fanatics, I believe, is focused on. But I'd really encourage people out there, instead of focusing on your card group and what they are or aren't doing, focus yourself on what you love sports wise. If you're a Man City fan, are you in the Man City Facebook groups talking about Erling Haaland cards?
Yeah.
They don't know. I'm in a Star Wars collectors Facebook group that has 70,000 Star Wars collectors.
It's insane.
And they're posting Legos. They're posting houses that are top to bottom Star Wars memorabilia, playset setups. And I'm like, hey guys, did you see this cool sketch card? Like, it's not hard, and it doesn't need to be shilling. It can just be, just reminding people that cards are fun. Almost like cards are cool. Are they?
And that's what sparks me back up too, is because, like you said, it reminds you of what got you into it. And for me, it was my dad. My TJ, so.
Well, sorry, I jumped on you with a great heartfelt story to say something like hobby pushing, but are you in Alabama fan groups? I mean, college fan groups are crazy. Did you post your one-on-one pickups in there?
Yeah, and people get pissed off
because you have it and they don't.
Yeah, no, I have. There's one guy that has he's trying to complete the flawless rainbow, so I can't really ask perspective to anyone, because if I see a one-on-one, I'm going to buy it and I'm going to overpay. I'm not going to finish that sentence.
Yeah.
If he watches this video, but.
Yeah. but you're talking in card groups. I'm talking about are you in, because I come from Nebraska where the Huskers are king, I know a guy who runs a Husker website that gets 1 million hits a month.
That's insane. I didn't know Nebraska had that many fans.
Yeah, it's all they have is fans. So like, are you in there? Are you in the Alabama groups?
Yeah, I'm in like Alabama Diehards as one, and then I'm on Alabama Memorabilia Collectors, which is just bonkers. Like, you think,
but those are already collectors.
What's that?
Those are already collectors.
You're saying just in straight up fan pages?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I've been on those since I was like 8 years old. So yeah. But
like,
they
if I search Alabama tailgate, I'm sure that there's a Facebook group that has 800 members in the Alabama tailgate group, 12K members in the birding Alabama group. Maybe we should all start birding. Wow, it's funny. Alabama tree huggers has 4.5K.
I didn't know there would be tree huggers in Alabama, but
yeah. Tiger tailgates. Oh, go in Tiger tailgates and post those Alabama hits.
Oh, there's one that's like Alabama Auburn collectors. And I'm like, why would you mix this? But there's a lot of cards out there back in the early 2010s where they would do collegiate football cards, like SP Authentic would do like Cam Newton and Mark Ingram on one card, or like rivalry cards for college players. They don't really do that too much anymore. Panini doesn't, but earlier Topps groups. So that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I just searched Crimson Tide fans, and there's like multiple groups with 5 figures of people in them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, that's where new collectors come from.
Yeah.
Like where are those? The soccer guys, are they, especially soccer guys, they all seem so burnt out. And I'm like, yeah, because all you're doing is talking to other soccer guys every day. Like, are you talking to new fans?
Yeah.
Huge market. I have friends that run shops in Europe and they're like, we can't get enough. While all my American friends are complaining, soccer's down, soccer's in the mud.
And they don't have their international shipping on.
I mean, they probably do, but it's about getting more. It's about getting more people to rip a pack.
Yeah, I agree. I 100. I like what Damian Rodrguez is doing. Not sure if you're. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, yep.
you're Damian. I know that's going to be a hot button issue when that goes on YouTube, but I like Damian.
Well, I
Um,
mean, he just posted today, with some people attacking him for things that they think are shady. And believe me, there's so much. If you were around 10 years ago, like, everything was behind closed doors. The fact that Damian's doing what he's doing in public, that's a win to me.
yeah,
But something that he posted that I loved is, he's like, here's my signing with Ronaldinho. When I first saw him do one of these, he was, the players were frustrated because they didn't know what they were signing these stickers for. And so when we introduced cards to it and we brought snacks,
yeah,
it took the player signing from here to here. Like, yeah, just educating the players a little bit on what they're, giving a piece of themselves to. Because keep in mind, like, it's, oh, woe is me, NFL player, soccer player, millionaire. I know people hate having any sympathy for them. But dude, they are just like me and you. They're just as frustrated with life. They're just as ticked off by the little things. They stub their toes. And imagine adding to that the layer of, I am giving myself.
right.
Maybe it's the Hollywood in me, but I think we don't have enough compassion for celebrities, for what they actually give, what they give up to get that money. But again, maybe it's the Hollywood in me. Leave a comment below on the YouTube and tell me how out of touch with reality I am.
The South will do that for you. I'm down here in the
Based on,
South, so
yeah.
I would love for you to come to middle of Florida and say that. I get what you're saying though. I completely agree. And I think athletes too, it's like people treat them like you always see that, like Steph Curry ignored me when I was trying to get a fist bump. I seen it this morning and I'm like, do you really think he cares? Honestly, no. But now he has to act like he cares. But yeah, I understand. We had a show down here in Tampa and had an athlete just completely like dismiss us for autographs. And I'm like, I kind of understand it, but you do it every time. And I won't say any names because it's a prominent athlete and I don't want to throw Wander Franco under the bus, but it's one of the biggest pains to get the sign. But I completely understand what you're saying. But we're getting to the time limit here, but I wanted to say thank you, and I really appreciate the insight you've given. And I want to give you a few more minutes to end off on whatever note you would like. And if you have a message out there for the future of cards, like where do you see it going? And we can take it from there.
I mean, it could. I don't like predicting the future because it can go two ways.
Both are
some
on right.
Yeah, some people love predicting the future because they've got a 50% chance of being able to say, I told you so. I really don't, because I told you so is not as satisfying as people think it is. It could go up or it could go down. That's the one thing I'll say. And why I love, why I love you, TJ, is here you are. You're a person. You may be a personality, but you're a person too. Like, same thing. I could stop making money on cards tomorrow. I will still collect.
Yeah.
Will I spend as much money on my collecting? Probably not. And I'd actually back that up with the fact that up until just recently, so I actually left a lucrative job to try to build a career about 7 years ago. And you'd be surprised how tough it is to build a career in that field. It wasn't until about 2 years ago that I could justify spending money on cards if I was not also selling. So flipping kept me in the hobby during the time when otherwise, just based on trying to be a good husband and then a good father, it wouldn't have made sense. So there is a beauty to flipping as well, where if I could justify to my wife spending $80 on 4 blasters if I could eke $60 in profit out of it, and have some cards for my collection and stuff to talk about with my friends online. Um, so, I would say it does depend on people's hearts and where they are, if they enjoy the cards and the community. Because that's the other thing. It's not just the cards, it's also the community. I've found my absolute best friends on Twitter.
Same here.
So yeah, you said 2 minutes, then asked such an open-ended question. You're going to get a 20-minute answer. But I've told this story. I've said this many, many times on stage at the National, on podcasts, and privately. When I was a kid, we used to drive to ride our bikes to the card shop about 3 miles from where we live. The Catcher's Mitt in Omaha, Nebraska. It's no longer there. But Jim at the Catcher's Mitt was a great guy. We'd ride our bikes there. Our neighbor had way more money than we did, could buy any card he wanted. We could not. But I still loved it, still love the hobby. And we would go there and I'd buy, my dollar packs of Collector's Choice. And then we'd go home, and my brother was a good collector too, but still not as crazy as me about it. And the neighbor kid who would buy everything, put it in a shoebox. And in 1991, 1993, that was all we had for collecting community. And then I got on Twitter a decade ago, and I suddenly found I could reach the world's greatest collectors at any time. I could reach people that cared more than me about cards, people that knew way more than me about cards. And it made collecting so fun that we aren't constrained by the fact that we've only got 3 miles and bikes in Omaha, Nebraska. So whether the hobby goes up or down, I'm here for it. I feel like, especially with what we talked about, TJ, with what you're collecting now, while Card Brokers is adding technology to the hobby and, doing new things, they're also fostering community, and the people in it find what they love to collect. And so the more we can encourage that, the healthier the hobby will be, and the more money at the end of the day we'll be able to make in the hobby, because more people will come. People will want that,
Right. And gaining that appreciation, knowing that it is a balance. You've got the collectors, and when the collector wants to sell a collection piece, somebody who may get their money from flipping, me, will buy it. So it's going to be, and then I put it in my collection, and I'll buy my collection pieces from other flippers or collectors or things like that. So I like how you ended that there, is that there is a balance, and whether it goes up or down, you're going to get positives and negatives on both sides of the spectrum. So I appreciate your time, Ivan. That just was a great interview, and I know everybody's going to gain a lot of knowledge listening, just getting perspective from somebody who's been in it longer than 2, 3, 4 years. So thanks again, Ivan.
Thank you, TJ.